Good evening, everyone. Today is Monday, January 24th, 2022. It's time for episode 15 of The Last Admiral. Some notable events today in history include, in 1935, the first canned beer was sold, beginning with Kruger Cream Ale and followed by Pabst. In 1965, Winston Churchill, former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, died at the age of 90. Some notable birthdays include Sharon Tate, Neil Diamond, and John Belushi. We will take up today's episode 15 at the top of page 117. It's a jungle out there. Their journey was harrowing. The terrain was muddy, rough, and treacherous. Clouds of biting insects plagued their every step, and the needles of biting black pine trees quickly left their exposed hands punctured and bleeding. Hanging vines tugged at their clothing and equipment, and deep washouts filled with stagnant water were hard to see under the pitch-black canopy of the rainforest. Fu's experience kept them from serious harm, for he knew the mountain and its forest paths by heart. He and his brothers often hunted the island's wild boars and other game in the area. Leading them truly, they came to the river's bank by twilight. It was wide, slow-moving, and deep. Giant catfish lived in it, and sometimes swimmers and anglers disappeared. Wraith knew the stories. "I hope that you're not thinking about swimming it." "Don't worry," Fu explained. "My father always hides a boat around here. Help me to find it." Searching among the trees and reeds of the bank, they soon found Lanu's dugout. Sizable enough for two, the boat was old and cracked, but still seemed solid. "It leaks," Fu cautioned, "but it will get us across." Staying low, they paddled silently. Dipping their oars and then pulling, they tried not to splash. Nothing stirred on the river, nor moved upon its far banks. Landing their craft, they pulled it ashore and hid it among the reeds. A dark wood loomed before them, within which were many log houses now empty and silent. Secrecy was their greatest ally. Studying the woodline and the lay of the land, they began a long, slow crawl through the marsh grass. Wraith led the way with Fu close behind. Somewhere nearby, an owl screeched. The jungle night was alive with the sounds of croaking frogs and scraping crickets. The constant noise was oppressive, deafening, and amazing all at once. Wraith smiled to himself. No guild master could have asked for more. Three Sisters, Tangled Webs. Ever since the massacre that slew every woman and child who lived there, the village had remained abandoned. Once it was thriving with lush cultivated fields of green, well irrigated by the mineral-rich waters of Lake Volca. Those same fields were cultivated again, but their farmers were working-class Dragonians, not the native planters of the past. When the Spider Queen of Dragonia had marched across the island with her conquering armies, the islanders had sought peace but met the sword. Those who resisted died, and those who surrendered were enslaved. Very, very few of them escaped. Driven to the shores of the lake, they were cut down, man, woman, and child, by the Queen's merciless general, Jinjang Lo. The islanders fought back well, holding the remotest jungle areas for many weeks, but victory was never within their grasp, for the longer that they resisted, the greater were the injustices inflicted upon their families who had already fallen beneath Jinjang Lo's forces. His soldiers hunted them, intending to wipe them from the land as if they had never been. If not for the cunning actions of a young Navy lieutenant, their dying cries would linger only in the haunting of eternity. "The dead cannot serve the Empire," Eklund suggested, "but living slaves can. Spare their remaining numbers, and I will use them to rebuild this island for the glory of Dragonia. Jin Janglo was pleased. I will save those that remain, he proclaimed. The army moves on, but one task I command of you. Use these slaves to build a new Shang Sun. The harbor must have defenses, docks for ships, and a town. Complete these works in 5 years, and the slaves shall live. If not, then both you and they will die. Yes, my general, Eklon replied. Going to work, he assembled the engineers, masons, and carpenters within his own command and combined their knowledge with what able-bodied islanders as were fit to labor. In 4 years, he completed engineering marvels that were wonders to behold. These included twin towering castles overlooking the harbor entrance, with massive stones so well laid that even the Magi were confounded by their design and construction. Long wharves with pilings deep and strong. 4 roads that span the island, the beginnings of a town, and more. They also laid the foundations for a school, later to become the premier center for military training in the empire. Jin Janglo's campaign swept southward along the coast and eventually ranged across the seas to the Shattered Isles, where he finally settled, never to return to Shang Sun. Queen Afra herself visited during the 5th year and granted Eklon a combination and a captainship in her queen's navy. Nearly 40 years had passed since Jin Janglo's army had departed, and those who lived in Shang Sun had largely forgotten the struggles and strife of those days. But the people and their ghosts who haunted the village had not. Zhao Conrung cared nothing for ghosts or the bones of the dead. He walked freely atop of both of them without fear. His mission goals and the love of his queen were all that mattered to him. She had foreseen that 2 men would come against him, test his skills, and try to thwart him. Lay many traps, she instructed, and they will die. Let nothing stand between you and the son of Eklon. 3 coven sisters waited with him, nuns and necromancers, with hearts both twisted and black. Highly favored by the goddess, the sisters' bodies had neither deformity nor blemish. Roaming the empire, preaching the gospels of Lothia, they enforced her commandments, laying claim to divine love and piety. They blessed their followers with one hand, while punishing all heretics with the other. Using their sexuality as a weapon, they offered ecstasy as an excuse for immoral acts and injustice. There were no forbidden depravities, if such could better their own ends. The first among them was Odu Roy, who bore a terrible whip stained darkly with the blood of the unfaithful. Wearing a red tunic over adamant mail, her leggings were black. Her ebon face was the mirror of her personality, hard-cut, haunting, and ruthless. She wore her hair long in a single braid. So Mong, the dream weaver, was second in their hierarchy, but equally loved by the Lothia and the queen. She rewarded her followers with pleasant dreams and punished her enemies with nightmares. Her armor was of the same fine make as her other sisters, with the black dragon symbol of the empire embroidered across the breast of her white tunic. A head of short-cropped, boyish hair framed her comely, young, mysterious face. She wore breeches boots and a cloak of black, and a sweeping, single-edged broadsword hung from her left side. A sheathed dagger adorned her belt beside her right hip. Su Su Tin was 3rd in rank, but equally loved. Favored by the queen, Lothia had granted her many spells, and she was an absolute master in their use. Dressing all in black, she favored the style of Under-Earth. Faith was her greatest weapon, but she carried an enchanted 6-foot quarterstaff and drilled extensively in its use. Her face was tall, but well-balanced, with eyebrows upswept and eyes of green, as she had been born on the surface. Her nose was slender and narrow between high cheekbones. Her lips were as expressive as her hair, which hung naturally to her shoulders. Her hands were lean and strong for military drill. Together with her sisters, they stood in a circle facing outward, their hands joined, locked in a union of minds, a circle of power, made greater by their number. Their combined sorceries were great, earning them fear and respect in whatever lands they roamed. The entire coven could likely stand against an army of tens of thousands, and 3 were more than enough for 2 unsuspecting interlopers. "Come to me, Rakshasha," Susu called out unto the night, for she had sensed an old presence on the island, wicked, sinister, and hungry. With her sister's wills combined with hers, she was able to summon him, a tiger older and greater than any normal tiger that had ever lived. A legend among the people, Rakshasha was now only a story to keep children from roaming out of doors in the dark, but he was very real. A tiger he was, but possessed by a demonic entity from the abyss, an entity that had been sleeping in his dark cave in the jungle for many years. His terrifying roar shook the forest and silenced every creature. "He comes," Susu cried. "Search the forest, find those who come against us, crush their bones, devour their hearts." Rakshasha screamed in feline anger, offended beyond measure by their summoning, but their goddess was sovereign over his kind, and he could do naught but obey them. He would take out his rage on his prey. The spoil of the kills would be his and his alone. Stretching his 4-inch claws, his muscles rippled. With the mighty leap, 14 feet of cat raced through the jungle, testing the wind, hunting for his quarry. He would not stop, nor could he, until his task was completed or they released him. Many would pay for this outrage. He would feast upon the flesh of the innocent until the ocean ran red with their blood. This is my little drawing of Rakshasha and poor little Fu. Okay. Then we'll start Demon of the Jungle. "What in the abyss was that?" Wraith said. "Tiger," Fu replied. "A big one. There are still a few that live near the mountain peaks in the densest jungle." "Then what is he doing down here?" "I don't know," Fu admitted, "but he must be desperate to hunt in the valley." "Or controlled," Wraith surmised. "It is the work of the Coven. We must deal with this before we face the rest of them." "The Coven?" Fu asked. "They are the priestesses of the Spider Queen," Wraith explained. "Evil witches and religious fanatics who worship Loftia, the goddess of the Dark Elfar. They are dark elfin like me, beautiful and deadly. When we meet them, do not hesitate. If they have time to use their magic against us, then we will be dead before we realize what has happened." Fu's eyes widened with Fia's imaginings. The demonic assassin was nearly beyond the limits of his courage, and now they had to face a tiger and witches as well. Swallowing hard, he tried to bury his fear. "Don't give up on me, Fu," Wraith beseeched. "We are formidable ourselves. I have seen the secret that you keep. I too was once the friend of giants. I wear a mighty gift of theirs, which gives me the same power that you possess and more. None of our enemies knows this. Let us use this to our advantage. The giant said that my strength would fade once my task is done." "Then you are not done," Wraith reasoned. "Follow me carefully. Crawl where I crawl, and step exactly where I step. If there are traps here, I may see them in time to save us." Moving slowly into the cattails, Wraith tried to find the safest and quietest route to the woodline. His senses felt alive, so awake that it almost hurt him. It was just like the old days. Covered in mud, they were crossing through the dense vegetation that always grows along the forest's edge, when they heard a loud splashing sound coming from the river behind them. "He's found our trail," Wraith declared. "Stay quiet and follow my lead. We don't have much time. If we can find a decent tree, I want you to climb it. I will face the tiger on the ground. Use your arrows if you can, and keep your spear ready. Let's go. Within the wood, the moonlight could not penetrate, and darkness reigned. Wraith's eyesight was now at its peak, but Fu was entirely blind. Grabbing Fu by the hand, Wraith led them on. Ahead of them was a deep, muddy pig's wallow, and beyond it the jungle became impassably thick. Tall, massive trees were in abundance, and a few of them were climbable. Wraith chose the best one for Fu's protection. Its limbs rose around it, thick and tall, like a giant squid standing on its head, and any tiger would find it difficult to maneuver within its boughs. The march to its base through the mud was harrowing, especially for a young man stumbling about in the dark. Climb it, Wraith commanded. We face the beast here. I know that you are blind, but in a few minutes, this place is going to light up like the winter festival. Seek out a good place to stand and shoot from, as high up as you can. I will be right down here. Fu wasted no time. He could not see his hands in front of his face, so he relied on his other senses. Feeling his way up the tree with his hands and feet, and occasionally with his head, he found it to be a complex yet easy climb. He was nearly at the top when he heard its rumbling growl. It was no ordinary tiger. He could feel its presence clinging to its skin like a dirty shirt. He could feel its evil presence clinging to his skin like a dirty shirt. Turning about, he rested his spear on a cluster of branches to his right and prepared his short bow. Breathing hard, he tried to calm himself, but it was no use. I smell your fear, Rakshasha growled. Bare your throats to me, and I will make it quick. Come and get us, Wraith taunted from his hiding place. My blades have been dry for too long. I know you, Rakshasha asserted, son of Mak, master of a forgotten guild. When I have finished feasting upon your soul, I will destroy your house. I can see you, Wraith mocked. Can you see me? Rakshasha roared, coiled his hind legs beneath him, and leaped. Soaring across the wallow, he landed at the base of Fu's tree. The girdle of Skygate glowed, and Wraith clutched a lightning bolt. Stepping forward, he hurled it, striking Rakshasha. With a savage cry, he scrambled toward Wraith, but the mud slowed him. The burning shock was painful, but Rakshasha was no ordinary tiger. His demonic soul was resistant to such energies. He would take his time with this enemy. Wraith would know tortures undreamed of before he died. The sudden light stunned Fu. Wraith stood beneath him, glowing like a bonfire. His peasant's cloak was gone, and only the wiry guild master remained. Before him was a tiger unlike any that Fu had ever seen. 6 feet tall at the shoulder and 3 times as long from its head to the tip of its tail. Its skull was fully 2 feet wide. Wraith launched another bolt of lightning, and the cat lurched beneath the impact. Fu was determined to do something. Taking aim, he launched an arrow, but it grazed a branch and flew off course. Knocking another, he searched for an opening. It's no use, Rakshasha hissed. Your magic means nothing to me. Wraith no longer listened. His mind was solely on the fight. Drawing his rapier and dagger, he tested his footing and found it solid. A lifetime of training had honed his reaction time to a razor's edge. In truth, he was one of the fastest swordsmen alive, but he did not know it. To him, he was just Wraith. His wisdom was their only chance. Rakshasha leaped and Wraith ran, suddenly and swiftly, into the dense jungle canopy. Long clinging vines draped off the trees to the forest floor all around him, creating a maze that was much to his liking. Enraged, Rakshasha followed on his heels. Immediately, the tiger encountered the forest web. With savage power, he lashed out with his great claws and cut them down. clearing a path before him. Wraith wound his way through the vines, seeking denser jungle where he might go, but Rakshasa could not. Racing on, he soon realized the unnatural power of the thing that pursued him. Vines, small trees, shrubs, everything less than a foot thick was no hindrance to the beast, and so Wraith did what it least expected. Timing Rakshasa's blows, he waited until the cat was in full swing before he turned and rushed in. Face to face, with fury incarnate, he cut at the tiger's shoulder and ran on, forcing the cat to turn to follow. Unfortunately, we're out of time for this episode, so we'll have to take up the battle where we left off on page 126 next time. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a great night.